Hi everyone and welcome to The Raw Show with Michael McDonald, and I have a very special guest. We have Tracey Minutolo joining me today. Tracey, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Tracey's been a side hustler since before there was a name for it. She was a full-time lab supervisor who started a virtual assistant business almost 2 years ago, serving podcasters with purpose. Working with one client in particular opened her eyes to the possibility of coaching, and now she works directly with motivated 9-to-5ers to design and launch profitable service-based side businesses centered at the intersection of their passions and their existing skills. So that's quite a mouthful there, Tracey, to kick us off. So would you be able to share with me and our listeners a bit about your background, so where you were born and what it was like for you growing up?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from New Jersey, so living in California now, but I grew up in the Northeast, and they're getting hammered with snowstorms right now, and I'm kind of happy to be sitting here in San Diego. Pretty much just, your average middle class upbringing. I grew up in North Jersey in a pretty small town. And, my high school class was about 100 kids. So it was relatively small. But ended up moving to the shore area after that. So when I was 15, we moved down about 80 miles away, but right down near the beach and everything. And it was a little bit of a bigger school and kind of a bigger place. But yeah, I mean, nothing too remarkable, nothing too outstanding. In terms of entrepreneurial stuff, my parents are both full-time employees. So it was kind of the furthest thing from their mind. And it wasn't anything that I got introduced to until much, much later in my life. But, and then I went to college, I studied biology and became a microbiologist.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So what drove you to wanting to start something on the side then? So was there anything in particular? Was it a process where you just wanted to try something different? Was there anything that caused that spark in you that made you want to do something as well as being a biologist?
Yeah. So while I would say my upbringing wasn't anything like remarkable in terms of entrepreneurial things, I would say that, I had from an early age, had a work ethic, like deeply instilled from both of my parents. They worked very, very hard. My mom was an RN and my dad was a warehouse supervisor, and they both worked really, really, really long hours. And that was one thing that I think that they held as one of the biggest, core values, was just hard work, like a work ethic and not quitting. And so for me, graduating college and having this student loan debt over my head, I decided I wanted to kind of try and chip away at that by earning extra money. So I landed, I graduated at a time when it was a little bit easier to get a job. It was early 2000s, and that was before we started having some of the economic difficulties here that folks that are younger than I am have kind of suffered from. But I was able to get a job in my field right away. Started making, more money than I'd ever made in my life before. Did not know how to handle it. Went out, and within the year I had bought a brand new car. I was living in my own apartment. I was a musician, so I was playing in bands and buying equipment. So I started racking up a lot of debt, actually. And then I had the student loan as well. So I wanted to go and make extra money. And so at the time, the only things that were, in my, at least, immediate, I guess, mind was to go get a part-time job. So I ended up working in a bookstore, in the evenings. So I worked full-time as a microbiologist, would come home and then work, in the evenings in a bookstore near my house. And I did that for years. So I've always kind of been doing something, like since those days, I've always been doing something additional to a full-time job. Wasn't always a business. It was like, from that point, it became, when I moved to San Diego, we have a lot of hospitals and we have universities around, and there are a lot of studies happening, research studies happening, and they're looking for volunteers a lot of times. So I went in and I did something like a sleep study. I went and slept in a lab for 2 nights in a row, and they kind of wired me up and tracked all my vitals and everything, and I earned money for it. So I did things like that for a long time. But what really pushed me is, I mentioned earlier that I had been kind of not managing money very well, and that only compounded when I moved out west, because for a little while I wasn't working in my field, and I was doing kind of retail, and I was doing the barista thing for a little while, and my debt was just snowballing. And so I ended up really needed to needing to do something. By the time 2008, 2009 rolled around out here, and we did have some economic difficulties, the job that I was working at, it was a very, very small contract lab here in town. I was one of like 15 employees of this place. To give you an idea of the size of this place, it was really tiny. And in order to kind of keep from laying anybody off, my bosses decided to cut us all back to 32-hour work weeks. So they cut our salaries as well.
Right.
So we all had an extra day off each week, but we lost all that money. And for me, I was already kind of living on the edge, with huge credit card payments, living in an expensive city, in my own apartment, again, kind of doing this thing. And so I panicked. I freaked out. So I got myself into debt management, pulled myself up by the bootstraps, paid off all my consumer debt. And then on the tail end of it, I became very interested in building wealth and kind of getting past, that point in my life where I was going to be like, just held down by debt. And, I wasn't going to let money kind of do that to me anymore. So that's when I started listening to podcasts, and I really started getting introduced to folks who were doing things a little bit differently. People just like me, who, people, full-time employees who had this side hobby or side passion or this other skill set, and they were monetizing it. And I credit shows like, the Side Hustle show was actually a big influence on me at the time. The Well-Kept Wallet was another one. Happen to Your Career was another one. Just listening to people really create for themselves, these opportunities. It just was mind-blowing. So from there, that's when I started that would be the real start of the process for me on the road to starting a business.
Right. So what was because you mentioned that you sort of tried to get yourself out of the financial hole, as it were. What sort of things did you do? So you mentioned bootstrapping, I think. So what sort of things did you actually do? Did you go through a process? Did you have certain strategies? What actually happened for you?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing when I kind of hit the bottom there, when my employer had cut our hours back, and I panicked, I went into a debt management program. And so what that meant was basically all my credit cards, I wouldn't be able to use them anymore. So they basically they suspended all those accounts. They negotiated for lower interest rates, and I made a single monthly payment, a gigantic one, but I made a single monthly payment, and it took me about 3 years to pay all of it off. But I did. But in that time, I wasn't able to use any credit. So there was no more living from paycheck to paycheck and charging gas and charging groceries and none of that. I had to live. It was just cash and carry. So I really had to relearn, how to deal with money and just completely rebuild my relationship with money and my respect for money. And so when I came out of that, when all that was done, I really started developing more of an interest on what was, in what was next for me, beyond, because previous to this, I really always kind of imagined myself being in debt in some way. I think that was my experience growing up. Most of the folks that, were around and my parents were always in debt. And that was kind of just the example that I had. But for me, I just never did much thinking beyond that. And so once the debt was getting cleared up, I was thinking to myself, what's next? What do I do next? So that's what kind of was the catalyst for searching out ways to do more. And I realized that I kind of fell behind, spending 3 years paying off this massive debt kind of put me behind in, say retirement savings and that kind of thing. So I realized, that I needed to kind of pick up some speed and gain some ground.
Right. So how important would you say the change in environment or the change in what sort of people you were exposed to? So you mentioned listening to podcasts and things. Now, there could be people listening to this that might be in a very similar situation, and that just the people that are around them are all doing the same things as them, and maybe they're not quite happy about that. So how important would you say trying to be exposed to different people was for your likelihood of breaking free of that?
I think it made all the difference. I really do. And for me, at first, it wasn't the people that I was spending time directly with. Most of those people were in debt as well. It was the folks that I sought out, and in the form of podcasts, in the form of blogs. And then later, things have developed, and I've, my network has grown in San Diego quite a bit. So it's now, that's not the case anymore. But when I started, it was just me kind of taking that first step to seek out those voices and to seek out people who were, had a different view on it. And it wasn't so hopeless. It wasn't so much like, I'm just always going to be in debt, so that's the way it is. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. But it really does make a big impact, who you spend your time with and who you're listening to, who's getting into your ears.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I definitely echo as well. I mean, it's almost like we are the average of those people. Like we tend to conform to what's around us almost. And it sounds a little bit silly, but if you are around those people that you want to be like and that you want to spend your time with, and you want to live in, you want to live in the same way, then it's a little strange, really, because if you listen to it, it's kind of like, well, that would just mean that I'm around people that I'm different from. But then, how did you actually benefit from it? Because I would imagine, just from hearing you say it and the experience that a lot of the people that I talked to have had, was almost some kind of disconnect from that. So you don't suddenly listen to podcasts, and you don't suddenly read blogs and things, and all of a sudden your life changes. What was the actual shift like in terms of going from the exposure to that to then actually living that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely. And it didn't happen overnight. It was really just the first little spark of an idea that I had that, maybe there's a different way to do this. Now that I'm getting out of debt, there's more to life. There's more to dealing with money. It doesn't have to be terrible, and I have more power in this than I thought I did. So, just seeking out the shows that were kind of focused around, personal finance, wealth building, money management types of shows. That was kind of the first place that I started. And through those, I started hearing about people who, had full-time jobs, who were making side money doing, different things. And just really listening to more and more of that and finding people that I could relate to. And then thinking, well, why can't I do that? And then having, and this was a progression, over several months of time, like kind of these little light bulbs going off in my head, like, oh, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. And I just kind of started myself on this little, this process of evaluating ideas. And, I bought a course at the time that I was using to help me kind of evaluate. It was one of Ramit Sethi's courses at the time.
Yeah.
To kind of evaluate ideas. And, eventually it just sort of dawned on me. I was driving, actually. It was my commute one day. I was thinking to myself, like, I have done all of this social media updating and WordPress, blog updating, all these things for organizations here in town they're nonprofits, and it was on a volunteer basis. Like I had done all this stuff for 2 organizations here in town that work with homeless teens, but it was just volunteer, and it wasn't anything major, but it did expose me to this new skill set that I didn't get in my day job. I'm so I have this skill and I have this interest because I found it to be really fun. I really kind of enjoyed learning about social media, and playing around with WordPress was fun. So I was like, I wonder who could use that, kind of a, service. I wonder. So I started thinking, and I had heard somebody mention virtual assistants out there, and I was like, oh, that's a thing. Like you can actually, you can actually put your skills to work because it's all online. Why not? It's virtual. You can help people out who live across the world from you. Like, oh my God, how cool. And I was listening to more and more of these podcasts, and I was like, I wonder if any of these hosts could use help. And that's really how it happened. And it just hit me one day in the car. So from there, there were a couple of shows that I was following a little more closely. And I, when you're on somebody's list for a while and they email you and they say, tell me what you're struggling with, just hit reply. And, I read all my emails. Like, that's kind of, most folks have done that at some point. I think if you have an email list, you probably have done that. But, I actually replied. I said, hey, this is what I'm working on right now. And, so I had built a little rapport with 3 of the podcast hosts of the shows that I was following. And so at that time I was like, well, and here I was doing a little target market research and not even realizing it. So I was like, this is the service that I'm thinking of providing. This is the skill set. These are the skill sets I have. What would you be looking for in a virtual assistant? What are the types of things you hire out for? Have you worked with a virtual assistant? What did you like about that? What did you not like about that? I sent them just a handful of questions, not even as many as that, but just a handful. And I got some great responses back from all 3 of them. I got an ebook on all about how to, on just the virtual assistant, just everything about virtual assistants. It was amazing. I got a little bit of advice back, and then I got basically one led to a phone call. It was like, well, actually, I have some work that I need to hire for. Would you be willing to hop on a call? And then that's how I landed my first client.
Right. I mean, you mentioned things like having an interest in social media before then, almost trying to figure it out after you had the interest. So if someone's listening that might have an interest in something that's different from their job, do you have any suggestions for how to almost make it into a business? So we're not talking like, okay, how do I find out what we're interested in? Because that kind of goes without saying that if you want to do something alongside it, you need to have an interest in it, I think.
Right.
So if you're not sure what you're interested in, if you're listening and you've got no idea what interests are, then it could just simply be a case of experimenting and finding out what you do actually enjoy and what you do have an interest in, But
Right.
what happens after that? So after they've gone through this whole discovery process, how would they, or how did you actually go about making sure that you could turn it into a business to begin with?
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to being honest about what your skill level is, not trying to take on something that's, out of the realm of possibility for you, but I think also not selling yourself short. And then it's finding the right types of clients to start working with. Like maybe it's somebody else who's also relatively earlier in their business journey, but not so early that they don't have income to pay you with. But, somebody who's willing to take you on as sort of a, somebody who could learn on the job, and if that's okay. And that was okay in this case because I found a particular podcast host who was like at the stage where he was getting ready to leave his full-time job and make his coaching and everything a full-time thing, but he was still working full-time and he was getting busier. And the podcast was starting to pick up and his coaching business was starting to pick up and he really needed help. So he was at that stage, but yet he had never hired anybody. And he was still I was his first ever outside hire. So he was very open and very much like, let's work through this. Let's build this together. We're going to create, standard operating procedures so that someday, I know you're not going to be with me forever, but someday we'll have all this stuff documented so that we can, kind of build this out and anybody else can kind of pick up the ball and run with it. So I think it's just finding somebody who is willing to let you kind of jump in and kind of get your hands dirty, but also knowing that you're able to get some kind of a result. Knowing that you have some basic proficiency and just kind of matching that up. That's really what it comes down to. And I don't always recommend that people start out necessarily working for free. Sometimes it makes sense to do that if you can afford to do it, but I always say keep that really, limited. Get in there, get your first client, work for them for, however long it takes to get a tangible result, a visible result, something you can turn into a nice testimonial or a case study, and then move to paid as quickly as you can. Or the better thing is really just to charge, a much reduced fee and say, hey, I'm just getting started with this and I would love to work with you and this is what I can do for you and, work it out and don't be shy about it.
All right, for sure. So it comes across then like, it's almost like you've got to be quite honest with how good you are or whatever it is that you're interested in before you then decide on turning it into a business. So what would you say to someone then that might not that feel that they're at that level yet? Is it just a case of getting better? I mean, is the side hustle only for certain types of people? Just trying to have some kind of idea on who can actually do this.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think finding something that you love and that you really geek out on is key because, you always, no matter what it is, you always want to be learning. Even if you are very proficient at something, things change. There's new information all the time, especially if you're doing anything, computer related or anything in the online space. Things change so quickly that you really need to stay on top of it. So I think it's not necessarily a disadvantage to come in with, just a basic working knowledge and not much more than that. If you like getting your hands dirty, if you like getting in there, learning, taking courses and things like that, and just fiddling around and figuring things out, I think that's really what the key is here, that you're constantly growing and constantly developing your skills. So no, you don't have to be, the world's greatest expert at whatever it is you want to do. You just have to be able to, provide a result for somebody, be able to, get something done for them that they will be willing to pay for.
All right. So what if someone was, let's just say, they got their job, but it was at the other end of the education system. So someone was probably in a similar situation to yourself, Tracy, where they did their degree and then they got their job like almost straight out of university. You know, yourself with the what was it, the biology, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
at what point would they then go, well, it's all I know? You know, if someone's just gone through school and high school and college or university or whatever happens to be, and at the end of that, they might have got a job, but then they're like, well, I'd like to do something extra. You know, they might enjoy the job, but they want to do something more, but it's all that they know. You got any advice for those people?
Yeah, because I think very rarely, quote unquote, that's all you know. I think that a lot of people tend to overlook the things that, we're best at because we just take those things for granted. Those are the things that are just like usually right under our noses. And it's kind of the last thing we think of when it comes to, a possible side hustle idea. So one thing that those folks can start with would be to start with the folks around them, the people around them in their lives that know them very well and know, also maybe ex-coworkers or former, bosses, anybody they feel comfortable speaking to, but, just go and try to find out what those people think that their strengths are. So go to them with a couple questions and say, what would you say are my greatest strengths? What would you trust me completely to do for you? And basically let them reflect back and give you some information. And usually those reflections will have some kind of clues as to what your deepest strengths are and the things that you can really take and run with. But you got to be careful too, because it's really sometimes the things that we're good at and people see that we're very good at may not be things we enjoy doing. So that's another word of caution, is really just to spend the time and really think about it. Try to picture yourself putting 10, 15 hours a week into something. And how does it make you feel? Take a temperature check. Is it something that's exciting, or do you feel kind of a sense of dread? It's interesting. I had a client recently who we were working together for a little while, and he was so set on, I want to be a podcast editor. Because he had his own show for 5 years, and he's like, this is what I want to do for side money. I just want to edit other people's shows. So, we got him to the place where he landed his first client, and he just was filled with dread. He was like, oh my gosh, and oh no, and put the brakes on, and he just realized, I don't want to do this. So, sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's like, you may be really great at something, but it might not be the best fit because, Mike, you alluded to this earlier, but if you're going to take on a side business, it's something extra. It's something additional to what you're already doing 40 hours a week. It's going to take you away from, family and friends and fun and, just laying around on the couch. It's going to take your time and your energy. So you want to enjoy it. It has to be fun.
Is there an element of trying it first that you've noticed with the people that maybe you've helped that you might think, right, well, I quite like to do X, Y, and Z, but they're so focused on it? I mean, you mentioned your client there. He actually had to go out and try it before he realised that, well, maybe he liked doing it because he wasn't doing it as much as, 15 hours a week or 20 hours a week or whatever the case is. So sometimes is it a case where they actually have to try it to see if they can make it feasible?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like for me, for instance, too, with the VA work, I did that for about 2 years, but, toward the tail end of that, I was getting increasingly anxious because I just realized that I was kind of bored with what I was doing. I was kind of over it. I wanted a new challenge and I wanted to kind of, move on. But at first it was pretty exciting and it was pretty fun. But what I always tell people as well is that once you start taking those steps, the next thing kind of reveals itself, but you have to be on the path. You have to be taking action and, meeting new people and trying different things, exposing yourself to different things in order for those things to be revealed. So this client that I mentioned just a moment ago, he has pivoted into voice work, and that is the thing that lights him up. That's what drives him now. And guess what? He's already got his built-in podcaster community. So he's got plenty of leads there and a lot of people to kind of network with. So it wasn't a crazy switch, but it was something that didn't occur to him until later in the journey.
Yeah. All right, cool. Are there any things that you could maybe point to that would make something viable and then something not viable as a side hustle that you would do alongside your job. So we're trying to go down the route here of maybe do's and don'ts. So are there any things that you would say, okay, once you've got these things checked off, that's the thing that you will go ahead and do? And are there any things that you would say, if you've got any of these, and you probably shouldn't go and do that thing?
Yeah, I would say, on a very and we're very, very much generalizing here, of course, but at least as far as service-based businesses go, if you do have a basic level of proficiency and an enjoyment of a particular thing, a particular activity, whether it's making websites for somebody or, copywriting or something like that, then yes, get started. Go ahead and see who you can help. Look within your network, see if, you have a friend or a friend of a friend, or somebody in your family knows somebody who you might be able to get, a little bit of experience with. So get out there and try it. I would say in the don'ts category, don't start a side business without telling people who have a stake in your time first. Don't go and start the side business and start working, on weekends in the morning and trying to just fit it in here and there. You have to actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I say that it's funny because this is what I did and I got in a lot of trouble. All of a sudden, on Sunday mornings, my girlfriend is like, well, aren't we supposed to be going to the gym? Aren't we supposed to be going out here? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on this thing. I'm doing this thing. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, all right, this is what I'm doing. But, it caused a lot of strife. So make sure you have conversations up front. If this is what you want to do, talk to your partner, if you have kids, let them know, I'm going to need this many hours, and have this be an ongoing conversation, because this isn't always going to be the same. Maybe when you're just getting started, you only need 5 hours a week, 10 hours, but then maybe as it grows, it might be 15, and let people know which days and what times, and have the discussion. Make sure that you have your workspace. Whether it's, for me, it's really just our kitchen table, but some people may have a little office or something like that, and just set those parameters up front and make sure everybody's involved in the discussion, and that there's no, expectations out there that, where people can get hurt. And so that's really kind of the best thing you can do if you want to have a sustainable side hustle, is just make sure that you've got the folks in your family and in your immediate network that they're on board.
Yeah, that's something that I think I would definitely echo as well. I mean, it's the amount of times that a lot of people have had frictions around pretty much anything, really, is because they've not actually had any conversations about things up front, and it actually makes things harder, because it's almost like you drop the bomb on that person, and they're not really sure how to adapt. They're not sure what to do because you haven't mentioned anything beforehand. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Are there any other things? So we're getting quite close to the end, Tracey. So we've done quite well. Are there any parting bits of guidance that you want to get across? So this is with the intention of not wanting any stone unturned, is kind of the angle I'd like to take. Are there any other parting bits of guidance or advice that you'd give to someone?
Yeah, so we already mentioned about taking action, and how that's really the best way to get started, is just to get started. And I know that's overdone. It's really overused, but it's just true. If you're curious about it, if it's something you want to see, if something's for you, the only way you're really going to know for sure is to get out there and do it. So go and see who you can help. But the other thing is really just to seek out support as soon as you can. Getting your family and friends on board is important, but you really want to surround yourself with people who get it, who really understand what you're trying to do, because we're not like everybody else. We don't come home, after work and sit on the couch. We get up early in the morning, and if other folks don't really understand what we're doing, they think we're crazy. So make sure that you've got that support network. Make sure that you have, other side hustlers or other people that just kind of understand what you're trying to do, and, utilize that. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'd like to leave folks with.
All right, cool. So, I mean, this is kind of gone down the avenue of people that want to get started and want to try to at least make something sustainable. But a lot of people might already have something going for them. They might already have something on the side, something that they're already doing alongside their job. I mean, we mentioned having conversations like beforehand to make things easier, but I get a sneaking suspicion that someone might already have that in place. So if someone already has that, what else could they do to make things easier for them in terms of, once you have the side hustle started and it's up and running somewhat, they're able to do it alongside their job. What advice would you give to those people that maybe might want to maybe reduce their hours in their job, or maybe they want to be a bit more efficient or effective in their side hustle?
Yeah. Well, actually, I use a time blocking approach. So it's kind of a modified time blocking approach. And I also bring in elements of batching and theming. So those are concepts I got from Mike Vardy of Productivityist. But so it's really this like system that I use with my clients and with the folks in my Facebook group as well. But it's really just this holistic way of looking at your time as one big, it's finite. So you look at your entire week, at a glance, and you look at how you're spending your time and where are you putting, because basically where you're spending your time is where it's where your focus goes. It's what you're focusing on. So it's not just your side business. It's not just your day job. You have to have, your family time represented in there, your gym time, your meals and your sleep and anything else you need in order to keep you, happy and healthy. That's really, really, really important. The other value in tracking your time, or not tracking, tracking time is the first part of the exercise. But once you've gotten that, then you build out your, what I call a sort of an ideal week or a template week. And that's where, you kind of block everything in. But where it really becomes valuable is, especially as side hustlers, where, time is tight anyway. So if somebody approaches us with a new opportunity or something changes and we want to consider taking something new on, my tendency is to say, yeah, I'll do it, of course. But what's helpful is to be able to look at this, you've got your entire week kind of blocked out. You can look and see where the time is going to come from. So you're not constantly piling and piling and piling. You're moving things and taking and adjusting so that you don't end up, driving yourself into the ground. Because really, why are we side hustling in the first place? It's really because we're moving towards, what we feel is the better life for us and our family. So why would we want to drive ourselves into the ground? So it's all about balance. Right.
And what would the moment be, maybe if someone, because when we go from the side hustle to this is now just the business, so we're kind of maybe projecting forwards a touch to someone that might have a side hustle, but they're like, okay, well, I'm kind of at a tipping point whereby the side hustle's getting to a point where it might even replace the job. So, I mean, this could be something that you're experiencing yourself, Tracey. So what sort of telltale signs would you predict in terms of, okay, maybe it's time to go full time with this?
Oh, wow. And, I never really, I underestimated the impact of this. I'll say that. So I did the VA thing for 2 years, and now I've been coaching for almost 2 years. And I never really thought it was going to have, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, so bear with me. But you know what? Like when I have to close my laptop now and I have to get, ready to go up to my day job, like it actually kind of hurts a little bit. It hurts my heart a little bit. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's that pull. It's that feeling like, well, I'd rather be here. I'd rather be doing this. I'd rather be coaching. And I think I didn't really anticipate that. And so for me now, it's given me a lot to think about. I do really love my day job. So that's why it's difficult. A lot of people are not in that position, but I do enjoy what I do at work. So I think that that's definitely a telltale sign that maybe, plans need to be made. And obviously a lot of that is financial. So you need to have a number in mind, like what is that monthly income from the side hustle that you need to achieve in order to even consider it. And then you probably would like to should have a financial runway to allow you, 6 months to a year to fully move into the business, and keep things running and make sure that, you've got that in the bank. So that's what I would suggest for folks. But as far as the signs that you might want to consider it, it's really just, how do you feel about it? Like, do you find yourself like I do, walking to the bathroom and checking my messages and texting my clients, and just being like, there's a pull. So yeah. Hope I answered your question.
No, it's just that, someone might be at that point, where things are going that well, and they've got to a point where they're thinking, okay, how do I make the decision to just do that? and the pull is something that I myself have experienced as well. So I've been at a point where it's like, right, well, I enjoy having the business. I enjoy, it's almost like you get to a point where you enjoy chill time and family time more than the job. It's more positive in terms of like how you feel about it. And as you say, you start to dread doing the job no matter how much you enjoy it, because you've got things that are, they're just more fulfilling than the job. Even if the job is very good, there's always the potential for something to top it, to be more than the job. All right, so we are getting close to the end now, Tracey. So just before we finish, how would you like people to connect with you? How would you like people to, maybe you mentioned your Facebook group and things, so this is your chance to share links and to share places to go if they wanted to find out more.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the folks that are on Facebook, I know not everybody loves Facebook, but I am there all the time. So including on my walks to the bathroom and the break room. So I will be there later today. I have a group for side hustlers who are looking to take their hustle from basically the sideline to prime time. So these are folks that are really working hard to replace their full-time income. We're called Side Hustle Success Lab. And you can go, if you want to go directly to sidehustlesuccesslab.com, it'll just shoot you right over to Facebook. And then for the folks that are not on Facebook, or if you just want to stop by and see me at my website, it's just traceyminutolo.com, TraceyMinutolo.com. And while you're there, you can grab, the time blocking method that I mentioned earlier, I actually have a workbook and a brief recorded workshop on there that you can grab for free. So it's called Master Your Schedule, and you can grab that right on my website. You can also get it inside the Facebook group in the pin post.
All right, excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Tracey. I will put links in the description. So if anyone's listening, just click the description of the episode and you can get those lovely things that Tracey mentioned. So just before we shoot, we've got one last question, and it is, what would you like the world to know about you that it doesn't already know?
Oh my gosh. Put me on the spot.
If you are struggling, we have had some funny things as well. So someone recommended that people send them chocolate cake. We've had people say that they like. I think a more recent one was peanut butter, Tracey. So we have had some. Let's put it this way: we've had some ingredients of success, to say the least. So yeah, well, there's no certain criteria for this one.
I've got one. I've always wanted to learn how to DJ. Really, I want to have the headset and just be, with the turntables. So that's something it's going to be on the bucket list, because I really want to learn how to DJ.
Oh, definitely. This could be your year, Tracey, that you go ahead and do it. Imagine. Imagine. All right. Well, thanks for being a guest on the show, Tracey. Really appreciate you carving out the time, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.